I think inviting them into more than just, oh, you're Gen Z, you know how to work technology, come do our slides for us. No, find out what their heart is, find out what their passion is, and give them space to learn that, give them the feedback and the training. They want those things, and treat them as actual humans, ask them questions, be curious. Don't just treat them like, oh, I know you're a kid, you can go do this, or you're strong, you can go move the chairs for me, kind of thing. There's a lot more to them.
Welcome to the Post Christian Podcast, where we help you make disciples in our increasingly post Christian world. My name is Bryant. I'm the campus pastor at Gateway in South Austin and Gateway Austin Online. I'm also the founder of Catalyzing Community. Sign up for our email newsletter at ericbryant.org and we'll send you free resources. On today's episode of the Post Christian Podcast, I have with me Elizabeth Cernoia. How are you doing, Elizabeth?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I met you, I think it was in the Dominican Republic. There was
Yeah.
an event with Missions Door. I was doing some of the devotional talks, and I was just impressed with the mission organization. Missions Door
Mhm.
has really grown to be strategic about finding and raising up multipliers and reaching people. And you have, I think, one of the harder mission fields, the Northeast of the United States.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
focused on Massachusetts and New York, and with a lot of your efforts focusing on college students. Talk a little bit
Mhm.
about your ministry. What is it like trying to reach college students in some very unchurched parts of America?
That's right. Yeah. When you look at it, both of the coasts along east of the both of the borders of the United States are the most unreached areas of America. And the Northeast in particular oftentimes comes in as some of the most post-Christian cities in the top 10. Like we'll hit 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 year after year. So it is the frozen few up here in the Northeast for sure. Um, College student ministry is great. It's interesting. It's changed a lot in the last 15 years or so. Um, I think the most important thing that we've come to realize is they're a people group. And when
Mm.
we look at them as if, oh, these are just us, but younger. Oh, I was young once. I get it. No, these students have experienced a completely different life, a completely different perspective on what life is. I never grew up with Alice drills where you would have to have these live shooter drills in school. These students are growing up with that. I don't remember growing up and hearing about tsunamis. Or I grew up in California. I don't remember growing up with hearing about giant earthquakes. These students have grown up with all of these things. So the world that they're in is a lot more scary. It's a lot more uncertain and unsure. And also, they're tech natives. They grew up with a supercomputer in their back pocket, most of them. And so they were really connected and are really connected to the world. So they know a lot about what's going on, which, I didn't. My parents watched the news. I would hear bits and pieces, but most of the time I didn't really care. I was off doing my thing. But these students are on social media, different types of social media all day long, and so they do hear about these different events. They have friends all over the world, so they care about events all over the world. So it really is a very, very different experience being with them. Yeah.
Well, and these kids were born after September 11th. Like they don't even know the world
Hmm.
prior to that. What are some of the ways you've been able to see college students open up about faith or even explore faith? You know, they're a very anxious generation. What are some of the ways that you and your team are serving college students to even broach the subject of spirituality?
Hmm. Well, the big change, and this is going to sound really strange, but it's actually been really kind of wonderful. Now that it feels like we've really crossed into post-Christian, students don't know the first thing. about faith. They don't know the first thing about the Bible. They don't know the first thing about any of the characters that are in the Bible. You know, if there's a meme with Moses, they don't know what that means. They don't have a clue. And where even just 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have to do a lot of apologetics to kind of work a student down from probably a really bad experience, or some really firmly felt perceptions of Christianity that weren't accurate, and we'd have to work backwards from that to just get to zero to then be able to present real Jesus. Now you don't have to do that. These kids come to you and they are just open books. They're blank pages. They have no idea. And so we work hard at presenting a curious Jesus, a Jesus that maybe they didn't know existed, a Jesus that loves them, that cares about them, that's interested in their lives, that wants to have a relationship with them. And we in Campus Ambassadors Missions Door, we do that by doing what we call incarnational ministry. We actually are on these campuses day in and day out, day after day. So rather than overseeing a bunch of different campuses, we'll put a couple of campus ministers at one specific campus. And every day, that's where they go to work and they sit in the coffee shop or they walk around the quad, or we will play cornhole out on the quad, or we'll do puzzles in the just the main hub area. And students will just get to know us in a really casual, comfortable way. We just become part of their environment. And then the next thing you know, we're having conversations about Jesus, asking them questions about, do they have faith? Have they ever heard of Christianity or Jesus? And yeah, so it's very almost a kind of grassroots, very organic. It's not evangelism the way that kind of I was taught when I was in churches when I first started, where it was very much more, where have you sinned? Okay, let's tell you why you're a sinner. You need a Jesus. It's not like that. We don't do that. So,
Yeah, it's really interesting. In some ways, some of these folks are more pre-Christian. You know, their parents walked
mhm,
away. I mean, sorry, it wasn't their parents, it was their grandparents who walked away from faith. So they
mhm.
just didn't grow up with any of it. I'd love to hear some encouraging stories of the ways you're seeing the message of Jesus really change some of the lives of these kids.
Hmm. So I'll tell you a recent one. A year ago, last fall, we showed up at our very first Bible study event, which is generally kind of more of a meet and greet. And a student walks up to me with a giant smile on his face and says, "Hi, I'm Muslim, but I wanted to learn about Christianity. Can I come?" And I said, "Yeah, of course you can come." And over the next few weeks, we would sort of just see him in the hallways or around and have little conversations. We always say, 5 minute conversation here, 5 minute conversation there. We eventually build relationship. And I'm trying to think if I should share all of this story because it gets a little risque. Uh, so he ends up a couple weeks in, he walks into us in the middle of a prayer meeting and just tears in his eyes and says, "Can I talk to you?"
Mm,
And I said, "Yeah, of course you can talk to me." And so we go off to talk to each other. And uh, yeah, I probably can't share it, but the long and short of it is socially, he kind of made a misstep, but
mm,
he just didn't understand what he had actually said. Uh, and it's actually pretty funny, but for him, it really wasn't funny because he kind of got called out on it. But he's sitting there in front of me saying, I don't know what I just did. I'm not sure."
mm,
That began a friendship where he actually started coming to our dating and marriage class that we were doing, which is all from a Christian perspective. We're looking at the Bible, we're going through passages. He invited me later to come and speak at a leadership conference. And I said, "Well, if I'm going to speak, I would really want to speak about my faith. And I would want to talk about, what's the heart of a leader from a Christian perspective." And he's like, "Oh, absolutely. That'd be great." He ended up getting an award from the campus. And so his parents flew from Pakistan to come. His dad ended up getting in an accident. So his mom came by herself,
wow.
doesn't speak any English, had never been on a plane, doesn't know technology, didn't know how to work a phone. So she flew, I think it was like 24 hours by the time she did all of her layovers and everything. Just so brave. So we ended up hosting her at my home, and we made special chai tea for her. And I investigated with a friend who works with refugees, what kind of food would she like and what should I get, and should I have a gift? And but he was so touched by that. He said, you know, no one has welcomed her into my home, into their home the way you did.
Mm.
And that she was the most honored when she came to your house. So he's graduated now and moved actually to Austin, to
Oh, is that
Texas.
right?
And we talk on a regular basis, over social media. We talk on the phone as well. So he has not made a decision to come to faith, but he is so open. But Eric, he came to a fall retreat with us. He had had this big work trip that was really quite an honor for him to get to go to. Came back from that on Friday morning, and Friday afternoon went to a fall retreat. We had the most amazing worship experience that Saturday. And I walked up to him afterwards and I said, what did you think? And he said, everyone should experience this.
Mm.
He said, I didn't know this is what Christianity was. No one ever told me. He said, why doesn't everyone experience this? Everyone should have to experience this. He was just so adamant, but it was such a beautiful response. And I just looked at him and I said, that's the Holy Spirit that you're experiencing. That's what it is to be near the Holy Spirit. And
Yeah.
he was just dumbfounded. So, yeah,
That's
God
so
is just,
beautiful. Yeah.
it's little by little, it's chipping away, it's becoming part of people's lives, inviting them into your life, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's such an important reminder, sometimes we're the ones that are sowing the seeds and others might get to reap. Who
yeah,
knows? Maybe we'll get to meet him here in Austin and build on what
yeah,
you've
yeah,
seen in his life. I do love that story. Just so much of living out our faith is actually demonstrating what it means to truly be like Jesus. The
mm,
news gives off a very different vibe of what Christianity is. Our
yeah,
history doesn't help us any. People who claim to be Christians who aren't, doing
mhm,
things that, in many ways don't represent Jesus. Maybe for a little bit, talk about this generation, maybe some other insights into Gen Z and Gen Alpha, things that would help pastors know how to even move towards these kind of meaningful conversations.
mm, yeah. I think some of the things that I've come to realize, one, they're really creative. This is really a phenomenal generation for all their faults, and we hear a lot about that on the media, but they're super creative. They're very, very generous and kind. The plus side of all the tolerance is that they're just very kind about things. Um, they aren't looking for the mistakes that you make,
Mm,
and they really value authenticity. And so I remember sitting with a student who said, yeah, I just can't go to that church anymore because the pastor, you know, he's trying to be something he's not. You know, he's
mm,
trying to be young. He's trying to do the bun and the tight pants, and it just doesn't work, you know? And they would much rather that we just are who we are. If we don't understand something, just go, I don't get it. I don't know what that is. Like, we don't have to have their lingo. We
mm,
don't have to understand their world, but we can ask questions about their world. So I think that's a huge way into their lives, is to just be a person of curiosity and be asking questions. I think
mm,
another big thing is they want to be part of something. They want to be part of what's going on. Where previous generations really liked to be on their own, they wanted to kind of be the mavericks. They wanted to forge the way by themselves. That's not this generation. They really like being part of a group. They they like some autonomy for sure. They want to be able to do things. They want to be told everything or micromanage. That is not a way to their hearts. But they want to be able to have some feedback. They want to be able to come back to a group and say, okay, how did that go? What should I do differently? We train a lot of our small group leaders, And one of the kids that we just trained, he was so beautiful. Every week he would come to the feedback session and say, okay, what do I need to work on? And the next week he would work on it. You would literally see the difference of what he worked on. So I think inviting them into more than just, oh, you're Gen Z, you know how to work technology, come do our slides for us. No, find out what their heart is, find out what their passion is, and give them space to learn that, give them the feedback and the training. They want those things, and treat them as actual humans, ask them questions, be curious. Don't just treat them like, oh, I know you're a kid, you can go do this, or you're strong, you can go move the chairs for me, kind of thing. There's a lot more to them.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. I mean, my hope and prayer is that these younger generations are the ones that bring spiritual renewal to our nation. You know,
Mhm.
there is that
Mhm.
openness to all peoples, and there is
Mhm.
really the world at our doorstep now, in our neighborhoods
Yeah.
now. Well, Elizabeth is can be found at missionsdoor.org. Just click on missionary. Cernoia, spelled with a C, Cernoia. Elizabeth, maybe one last question. What are some ways you would like to encourage church leaders who might be finding this season of ministry more challenging than they want it to be? What sort of encouragement do you have for those who might be on the verge of giving up too soon?
Mm, don't give up, that's for sure. I think what I've been thinking a lot about in my own ministry and watching the campuses I supervise in New York and Massachusetts is so much of it is just faithfully showing up. It's just over time. We don't always see, it's not going to be these big splashes. Those are the things that sometimes we hear about. That's what hits the news. That's what's in the magazines. Those are the stories or the books, right? But the reality is there's a whole bunch of us that are just faithfully showing up. And some days it doesn't look like much happened. Maybe that's a couple days in a row or a few years in a row. But something is happening. Something's happening under the surface. The faithfulness of continuing on. That really matters. Building those relationships really matters. Continuing to be faithful really matters.
I
So,
think that's such a great reminder. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your faithfulness. Keep up the great work there in Massachusetts
thank
and New
you.
York, and God bless.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Christian Podcast. More resources available at ericbryant.org.